If you're not yet familiar with the Newt blood scandal, one of the greatest outstanding injustices of our time, hold on to your seats.
There was a white flash. We saw this huge ball of burning flame, and underneath it was this white tail following it up. There was a big, thick, black line hurtling toward us, and it hit us.
Between 1952 and 1967, an estimated 22,000 UK troops were involved in 45 nuclear weapons tests and nearly 600 radioactive experiments in America, Australia and the South Pacific. What they were subjected to will shock you.
We were taken to a beach. They told us by Tanai to sit with our backs to the sea. Draw your knees up, put your hands over your eyes. That is the sum total of my instructions.
Minus 40 seconds, close eyes, close eyes.
There was about 2,000 of us. People worked out the navigation. We were 9 miles away from 2 air bombs. All we had, a pair of shorts and a t-shirt.
This is one of the biggest scandals in British history.
In Operation Buffalo, they ordered hundreds of men to walk, march and crawl on their elbows through fallout in order to see how much of it stuck on their uniforms.
Today, only 2,000 or so, most in their 80s and with chronic health problems, still survive. They report high rates of cancer, blood disease, birth defects, miscarriage and infant mortality.
The mission of the ship was to sail into the toxic fallout of the nuclear blast, to follow directly as it moves.
There is no doubt that the British government intentionally put men in harm's way.
The flash was so bright I could see through my hands.
You saw all the bones, tendons, everything through your hands.
Medical records detailing blood and urine tests taken to assess what impact these tests might be having on their bodies are mysteriously missing.
I know for a fact that I had urine and blood samples taken, and they are not recorded. But the MOD suggests they were never taken.
If the state was conducting medical tests upon servicemen and not informing them when they found serious irregularity, that is at the very least misconduct in public office. And more serious perhaps, gross negligence manslaughter in respect of people who have died as a result.
My wife had over a dozen miscarriages. One of my children had been born with 2 wombs, one hidden behind the other. My son, his right eye was buried into his nose, so all you could see was the whiteness. And his left eye was locked. Another son, he was born with 2 large holes in his heart.
Despite always denying it held information about blood testing, the atomic weapons establishment has recently been forced to declassify a top-secret database which contained thousands of pages of information about the program. And documentary evidence has been uncovered that atomic scientists took blood tests from these servicemen as part of a monitoring program.
Governments have fought every legal action, fought every war pension claim, but in 2023, after a really long FOI battle, I was passed a document. It was earth-shattering. It contained 150 documents, all about blood and urine testing of troops, of civilians, of Australian personnel, and of Indigenous people. I was astonished at the contents. blood testing, blood data, medical examinations on natives, everything that the MOD had said for 30 years that it didn't have. Hundreds and thousands of men were subject to orders for blood testing and had it done. And they failed to disclose that to multiple courts. It was proof the MOD had been lying all this time.
The failure to provide these records is unlawful and may even constitute a criminal offence. Hiding this kind of information behind national security exemptions could also lead to prosecutions for misconduct in public office, an offence which carries a maximum life sentence.
The only atomic test country with no recognition and no compensation reward scheme for those veterans who were put at risk, suffered damage, and whose relatives have suffered loss and damage as a result, then that shames us. That shames us as a country. There is no good reason, there is no good moral reason, there is no good military reason for withholding the recognition and the compensation that other countries have had.
Then Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey speaking at the Labour Party conference in 2022. Healey correctly points out the UK is
the only atomic test country with no recognition and no compensation reward scheme for those veterans who were put at risk, suffered damage, and whose relatives have suffered loss and damage as a result.
And he rightly says,
that shames us as a country, and we have to fix it.
But now in government, campaigners have labelled a promised inquiry into evidence of troops used in radiation experiments a sham. Nuclear veterans have accused the Labour government of yet another cover-up after an admission that no money has been set aside to investigate it. The Ministry of Defence announced an internal inquiry last year into allegations that servicemen, civilians and Indigenous people were unwittingly exposed to radiation and monitored for health effects by scientists. Defence Secretary John Healey promised a thorough review of evidence uncovered by the Mirror about the medical monitoring programme, a day after a BBC documentary highlighted the scandal. But 6 months on, Veterans Minister Al Cairns has made the shocking admission that no money has been made available for it. In response to a written parliamentary question, Veterans Minister Al Cairns said, "There is no ring-fenced budget associated with this exercise." So after saying in opposition,
that shames us as a country, and we have to fix it.
Now in government, they have provided no budget to the Veterans Minister Al Cairns for his review, and can't even say when it will produce any answers. As Alan Owen, founder of the campaign group Lab Rats, has said, a review without money behind it is just there to give the ministers cover if asked what they're doing.
There is nothing bigger or worse than what's happened to the nuclear veterans.
Unless there is a budget and a dedicated external team, there's no hope of getting any answers. You can't end a 70-year scandal on a shoestring. This is no way for the government to treat national heroes. This country owes them and their families a huge debt of honour and gratitude. But instead, successive governments have stonewalled them and subjected them to decades of maltreatment and injustice. Labour made their position quite clear in opposition.
There is no good reason, there is no good moral reason, there is no good military reason for withholding the recognition and the compensation that other countries have had.
But now in government, there is still no compensation scheme in sight, and no money has been made available for the thorough review promised. Well, let's show these national heroes that they're not alone. Let's show them that by standing shoulder to shoulder with them now, and by honouring the enormous sacrifice they've made for this country. You can support them by donating to their crowdfunding campaign page by clicking the link with this film.